DND number 9, Circle of Life, in Jesus' name, chapter 35. It's August 24th. It's still Saturday morning. Shelley smiled and drew a deep breath as she directed her thoughts to what needed to come next. "Help me, Father," she whispered. Once upon a time, there was a queen and a king. The queen was very pretty, and she looked a lot like you, Angelina, and the king was very handsome. He looked a lot like you boys. Now, this king and queen were very happy. They had 10 children. 10. She held up her hands and wiggled her fingers. "Can you count with me?" They counted off her children. That's how a family is supposed to be. A mother, who was the queen, and a father, who was the king, and then they have children, and together they all love each other very much. But then something terrible happened. There was this like a tricky monster. On the outside, he looked like a man, but on the inside, he was a very bad monster. And the tricky monster came and took the 5 littlest children away from the mother and father. "Away from the king and queen?" Noah supplied. Shelley nodded. "That's right." "Did he look like a T-Rex?" Manny asked. "Oh, I think so," Shelley answered. "But he didn't look like it on the outside, only on the inside, because he was tricky." "And what did he do to them?" Angelina asked. "Did the monster man eat them?" Shelley sighed. "Oh, no, he didn't eat them, thank goodness. But he took them away and he locked them up in a house. He wouldn't let them go back to their mother and father. He wouldn't let them go anywhere except out in the backyard to play. It wasn't so bad, except the king and queen missed their children and cried for them." And the older brothers and sisters wanted their little brothers and sisters back so they could play with them and hug them and take them swimming and take them to ride on the merry-go-round and take them to the store and buy them ice cream cone. And "I love ice cream," Manny said suddenly. Shelley touched his nose. "I bet you do. Me too." "What happened to the children?" Abraham asked. "Well, it was sad. They were away from the king and queen for so long that they forgot about them. They couldn't remember that they once had a father and mother and older brothers and sisters. But the children did have 3 special fairy mothers who took care of them. They fed them and helped them get dressed and played with them and read to them and taught them lots of things. And then one day, one of the fairies, a very brave fairy, found out that the children they were taking care of really belonged to the king and queen. And she went to the king's castle and told them that she knew where the children were being kept by the man who was really a monster." Shelley looked from face to face. They seemed worried about the outcome. "And so the king and the brothers, who were princes, they came to the house and killed the monster and took the children back. And the queen and her daughters, who were princesses, were so very happy to see her children again that she hugged them and hugged them and hugged them. She couldn't stop hugging them." The children all smiled. "Did you like the story?" "Yes," they all said softly. "Well now, I have something else to tell you. The story I just told you was a true story. That means it really happened. And guess what?" "What?" they said excitedly. "The little children in that story are really you guys. You children were taken away from your real mother and father and couldn't remember them." The children were silent. "And Miss Luciana and Miss Camilla and Miss Lonnie, they are the fairy ladies who took such good care of you." The children all looked up at the women, who smiled sweetly at them. "And Bree," she pointed at her daughter, "is a princess, and she is your big sister. And I, my sweet children, I am the queen, which means I am your mother." "You are?" Noah asked. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm your mother." Our mother died, Angelina said with a frown. No, the fairies told you that your mother died because the monster made them say that, but it wasn't the truth. Your mother didn't die. I'm right here, and I'm very happy to see you and finally talk to you, and I'm going to take you back to the castle and take such good care of you. Where's the king? Noah asked. Shelley smiled sadly. Do you remember today when the man named Eric came to you? Yeah, he got killed. Shelley's eyes filled because he may very well be correct. Well, he's the king. He was nice, Angelina said. Yes, he's very nice, super nice. He's in this place close by, and some doctors are trying to help him so that he can live. We've been praying really hard that God will let him live. God loves us, Noah said firmly. Shelley looked up at the women, nodding her head in gratitude that they taught the children about God. Yes, he does. Very much, Shelley agreed. She decided it was enough for now. So, who is hungry or sleepy? I'm hungry, Manny said. Bree, will you get Taylor to come help you take the children down the hall to the vending machines and get them a little snack? I'm sure they haven't had any dinner. And while you do that, I want to talk to these ladies a minute. Bree went to get Taylor and came back quickly. Hey, Taylor said brightly when she came in. Who wants a treat? All of the children jumped up. Well then, follow me. Amazingly, they followed her right out the door, and Bree filed in behind. Taylor had always had a way with children. Shelley turned to Luciana. Do you ladies have your own families to take care of? See, yes, we all do. Shelley frowned. Well then, I suppose you wouldn't want to continue taking care of the children. I mean, help me take care of the children like a nanny type situation. I would, Luciana said, but my family lives very far away from your home. Both Lonnie and Camilla nodded their heads in agreement. Okay, I understand. But would you consider staying on a few days until we get the children settled in? I can, Luciana said, but just overnight. I cannot, Camilla said. I have a newborn baby. I only worked for Mr. Payne from 8 in the morning until 3 when Luciana gets there. Then I have to get right home. Even now, it's so late, my husband keeps asking when I will make it home. Her eyes moistened. I love these little ones, though. Do you think I could come by and see them sometimes? Yes, of course. They'll miss you too. And we'll pay for your transportation whenever you want to come and visit. And if you need to leave now, I'll have Jason arrange a driver to take you home. Gracias, Senora. What about you, Lonnie? I can stay tonight, but I have to be home by 7:30 in the morning. That might be difficult to arrange depending on what happens here with my husband. It might be best if you go ahead and go back with Camilla. She nodded, but Shelley didn't miss the worried look on her face. And I'll be happy to provide you with transportation if you ever want to come and visit the children. Shelley thought again, and it dawned on her. So, if you don't mind me asking, how much was Payne paying you to watch the children? $700 a week, Luciana replied. Shelley nodded. And now you'll have no income. She paused and thought. I'll continue to pay your salary until you're able to find another job. Will that help? Si, senora, they all said. Do you own your homes or rent? Rent, they all said. I would also like to prepay your rent for you for a year, just as a thank you for taking such good care of my children and as a boost to your income. So I'll give you my cell number and you text me the information where you live and who you rent from, okay? They nodded. Si, gracias, senora. And if there's anything else you need, please let me know. I want to help you. I'm so grateful. You can call me anytime for anything. There was a knock on the door, and Shelley opened it to see her daughters-in-law, Breeze and Bella, standing there. Hey, Shelley, we were thinking, it's dinner time. Why don't we take the children back to your house for you, feed them, and figure out some sleeping arrangements? We figure you're going to want to stay with Eric when he gets out of surgery. We think we can help more if we do this for you rather than sitting around worrying. Shelley nodded. Thank you, ladies. I would be grateful if you could do that. Luciana will go with you to help since she knows the children and they might be more comfortable with her there. And I'll get Jason to arrange a ride. No need, he has a van waiting. Breeze and I will be right behind it, and Agents Trout and Ward will be right behind us. Well, thank you, girls. Keep them all together. Jeffy and Cam are currently staying in Jeffy's old room, so try the room next. No offense, Shelley, but we got this, Breeze said. Okay, sorry, my mind is a little all over the place. Understandable, Bella said. So where are your babies? Shelley asked. Oh, we have a couple of teenagers from down the street who are going to spend the night at my house, and Em is there too, Breeze answered. I feel like I'm in a dream and I can't wake up, Shelley said, or more like a nightmare. We know. We feel the same way. Hang in there. Hopefully we'll know something soon. New scene. It's still August 24th. It's still Saturday evening. Special waiting area, Redwood Hills Medical Center. Shelley felt lost. Breeze and Bella had taken the children, along with Luciana and Agents Ward and Trout, to the house she'd shared with Eric for the past 30 years. Eric, who was her rock. Eric, whom she loved more than her own life. Eric, whom she missed desperately. Eric, the most amazing man in the world. And she wasn't the only one who thought that. Millions of people thought the same thing. Millions of people credited him as the man who changed their lives, the man who truly lived his faith, the man who they would most like to emulate. Tears welled up in her eyes again as they had been all day. He'd now been in the OR for 3 hours. How much longer could it take? Look at this, Taylor said to no one in particular. There are literally millions of people writing out prayers for Granddaddy and for Gabe. I mean, millions. Wow. She started reading them out loud. At the end of each prayer, the room at large would utter an amen. It was a good way to pass the time, and it was what they were doing when the door opened and Jeffy stepped into the room. She wore scrubs and looked as if she might fall over from exhaustion. She was now over 5 months pregnant, and she'd been on her feet for hours. She looked at the group of people who wouldn't be happy to hear the news. Her husband went to her immediately and sat her down. Tell us, baby, Cam said. He's out of surgery and on life support, meaning there are machines breathing for him and keeping his heart beating. The good news is the bullet didn't go directly into his heart, but it did nick the heart, and that's what took so long, trying to repair the damage. He almost bled out. He's been given a massive blood transfusion. Condition, Justin asked. Extremely critical. Prognosis, Ricky asked. She shook her head. It doesn't look good. But he's alive, Joey said, right? Well, yes, he's in a deep coma. Hopefully, as his body heals, they'll be able to take him off life support and he'll wake up and breathe on his own. But you don't see that happening, Mark stated. Her eyes filled and spilled over as she shook her head. Can I go in and see him? Shelley asked. Jeffy nodded and wiped her tears. Yes, one person at a time. Shelley stood and headed for the door and then turned. Some of you won't remember this, but remember that positive input plan you guys used on me when I was getting ready to fight in the mart? That starts right now. You go in and see him. You speak to him. You tell him you love him. You tell him a funny story. You tell him anything positive. You pray for him. You lay your hands on him and heal him in Jesus' name. Nothing else will be tolerated. She turned to Jeffy. Where is he? He's in ICU just 2 stations down from Gabe. So that you all will have a chance to see him, I will only stay for 10 minutes this first time. Next person be ready in exactly 10 minutes, she ordered. Then she left the room. I'm sorry, Jeffy said. I'm so weary. I should have been more positive. You were fine, Jeffy. We needed to know the brutal truth, Ricky said. He smiled. I was just thinking about what Dad said today, about Shelley always rising up in a bad situation. It appears that's what she's doing. He looked up. Jason, I'd like to get a recording of what he said to me. Shelley may eventually take some comfort in what he said. I'll take care of it, Jason said softly. We'd all like a copy, Mark said, especially Justin and Bree and Shelley and Jeffy, who didn't hear what he said. Jason nodded and closed his eyes briefly. He turned and left the room just as Keegan was coming in. Keegan looked around the room and wondered what he could do or say to help these people that he loved. He too was sick over what was happening, but war had taught him to pull it together and save the living. I heard Eric's condition from the nurse that's taking care of Gabe. I'm sorry. Look, whatever happens, we'll all get through this together. Somehow, some way. All I can do is try to think of what he would tell us to do. I love him, and I have so much respect for him, and I think he would tell us that we have to not grieve, but put our trust in God. He always told me that nothing is random, that God has a plan. So I'm going to try to show God that I trust him. I'm going to try to walk the walk. I mean, we all talk a big game, don't we? We talk the talk. We got to walk the walk and keep the faith. I believe in miracles. Do you? Ricky nodded. I do. I've seen too many to deny it, and I guess it just seems different at being my father. I mean, he's the patriarch. He's always the one walking the walk as things happen in our lives, bolstering our faith, making things right. It hurts so much that I can't turn to him and ask him what to do. And what would he say about that? Keegan prodded. Ricky thought a minute and nodded. He'd say it's not him I need to speak to. It's my Father in heaven I need to ask. Keegan nodded, which is a little harder and requires more faith. But Ricky, if anyone has that faith, it's you. You're the one who, out of the blue, said you felt led to share some thoughts with me, a person who at the time was a virtual stranger to you. You felt led to say things to me that answered every question I had about God. You are just as connected as Eric, and you are the one who brought me into the fold, and therefore everyone in my family also. So you are my hero, Ricky, and I have every confidence in you. He motioned around the room, and I'm sure I speak for a lot of people in this room. They all quickly agreed. Now I have another hero who has been an extreme blessing to me in my life, and he's not doing so well right now. What's wrong with Gabe? Jeffy asked. Not Gabe, he's fine. I'm talking about Jason. What's wrong with my brother? Justin asked. Well, he's blaming himself for what happened to Eric. That's ridiculous. He knows better than that. He says he should have had a vest on Eric. He says he shouldn't have let you guys in when Payne was still missing. He says the whole thing is on him and it's tearing him apart. Well, it's not on him, Joey said. It's on me. I was in the room. I thought it was secure. It's all my fault. I let you all down. Okay, now, you guys have got to stop this, Mark said. You know good and well that Eric would call you down about all this feeling guilty crap. You want to honor him? Then remember the lessons he taught you. Joey, there was no way you could know that that bookcase was a door. I should have known. I should have been more alert, more suspicious. A person doesn't just disappear. You were more suspicious. You went up to the guy's office and you figured it out, and that was a good job. Except I should have waited to let you guys in until after I figured it out. Mark shook his head and sighed. Hindsight is 20/20, but let's just break this down a minute. If Eric hadn't been there, Payne would have simply stepped out from that bookcase and gunned down the children. Eric was meant to be there to save those babies, and he did. He'd said many times he'd give his life for another in a second, and he did just that. He threw himself in front of that bullet. Now, maybe God meant for him to do that. Maybe God has a plan. We need to trust him, like Keegan says. There was a few moments of silence while they thought about Mark's words, and finally Keegan nodded. Well done, counselor. Justin nodded. Well done indeed, Mark. And I need to go find my brother and say those exact things to him. I need to go do that for him rather than sitting here feeling sorry for myself. I need to do what Eric would have me do, which is to help the people he loves in any way possible. He rose. Excuse me. New scene. Shelley braced herself and entered the room. Unfortunately, it was every bit as bad as she'd imagined. She approached the bed. They had him sitting slightly upright. He had a breathing tube in his mouth. She watched his chest going up and down. His chest was bare except for electrodes and a small bandage over his heart with a tube protruding out of it. She felt so much love and compassion for him that the tears ran freely over her cheeks. Reaching over the railing, she picked up his hand. There were IVs in both hands, and she was careful to not disturb them. This person in the bed didn't even look like Eric. Her Eric was strong and powerful. Her Eric was quick-witted and fast on his feet. He worked tirelessly. He played and fought and taught and made love, and it was so hard seeing him like this. She rubbed her fist under his palm. Oh, Eric, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. I love you so much. She broke down for a minute and allowed herself to sob openly. Then she shook it off and went on. I know you know that. I'll keep things together for the family until you get back. But only then, until then. So hurry and get well. Please, Eric. You can do it. You are the strongest person I know. She sighed. I met our children, Eric. They are so beautiful and so sweet. But they're a little bit scared, and they need their father to help them through this upheaval of their lives. They need you, and your other children need you, and oh, Eric, I need you. She closed her eyes. Father, would it help if I beg? Can I reason with you? I know I don't know your plan. I get that from my human perspective. I can't understand why this is happening. So give me your eyes so I can understand. Give me your heart. Give Eric your heart. These new children, they need their father. You know how valiant and special Eric is, and you know how good he would be with these new spirits. Please, Father, I beg you, give him one more time. Give him more time. I beg you to heal him. I beg you to let him live. Father, I know that your will be done, and whatever that is, I'll abide by it. But I'm still begging for Eric's life. I realize it's selfish of me, but I can't help myself. Forgive me. Forgive me. I will do your will, always. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. She squeezed his hand. I'll be back, my love. Other people need to see you. Hang in there, Eric. You can do it. She raised his hand to her lips and turned and left the room. Everyone looked up as Shelley came through the door of the waiting room. Who's next, was all she said. Ricky stood and went to give Shelley a quick hug before he headed out. Shelley looked up into his eyes, so like Eric's. Brace yourself. Ricky nodded and left the room while Bree moved forward and put her arms around her mother. She felt directly responsible for the two people closest to Eric, his wife and his firstborn child. Her mother and her husband. She hoped she could be strong enough to help them through whatever is to come. Keegan stood. I'm going to go check on Gabe. When he got to Gabe's room, he was startled to find two nurses, one on either side of the bed, working on him. What's wrong? Did something happen? Kelly smiled at him. Everything's okay. We just had a little mishap, huh, Gabriel? Gabe didn't smile but nodded his head. He ripped out his IV, Kelly went on, and in the process ripped a few stitches in his side. I'm sorry, Gabe said, his voice soft and weak. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. She patted his shoulder. Don't you worry about it, sweetie. Kelly put another piece of tape across his arm where they had moved the IV insertion and turned to smile at Keegan. He had a nightmare. Get him to tell you about it. I know his history. I follow him on Instagram, and I saw the video of his abduction, so I completely understand what happened. The doctor on call is on his way and should be here in a few minutes to see what needs to be done about the stitches in his abdominal wound. My shift ended at 7, so I won't be back until tomorrow morning. She looked back at Gabe. The nurse coming in is Christy. You'll like her. She's a cutie. Gabe smiled. That seems to be an epidemic around here. Kelly and the other nurse both gave a snort, and Keegan smiled. His son was such a player. The nurse who'd been working on cleaning blood off of Gabe's face and arm and abdomen and chest finished up and turned to scoop up the pile of sheets on the floor and left the room. Kelly frowned at Gabe. You've moved way down in the bed, Mr. Tanner. Can I get your assistance? Sure. You go on that side, and I'll go here. Hold him just under his armpit. Now, Gabe, bend your knees and put your feet flat on the bed, and when I count to 3, you help by pushing yourself up. Gabe nodded. 1, 2, 3. He pushed himself so high up his head bumped the headboard. Oh, well, that was easy. I'm not used to having my patients be so strong. She checked his IV one more time and then touched his forehead. See you in the morning. Thank you, Keegan said. She smiled. You're very welcome. Keegan turned his attention to Gabe. So, you want to tell me what happened? Gabe nodded and drew a deep breath because he felt so weak. I dreamed I was back in that building, the one where Mia took me. My wrists were tied together and I was trying to get them apart. I don't know exactly how I ended up ripping out the IV, but I know when I woke up, I was sitting up straight, and my hand was pumping out blood all over the place, and my side was burning, and Kelly came running in, and the other nurse too, and that's really all I know. Keegan sighed. Okay, well, no harm done, right? Gabe offered a slight smile. Well, only a little harm done. I'm sorry, Dad. Don't apologize for something you have no control over. Well, I have a little control now because I told Kelly that I don't want any more pain medication. It puts me too far under. I don't like it. Keegan nodded. You might change your mind about that, but we'll see. The doctor arrived. He was a young man and spoke with a thick Hindi accent. He greeted the Tanner men and quickly looked over Gabe's abdominal wound and left the room. He came back just a few minutes later with a nurse and a suture kit. He efficiently repaired the stitches in Gabe's side and checked the bandages on both his chest and his thigh and spoke briefly to Keegan and left. The nurse gathered up the suture supplies and looked at Gabe with a smile. I'm Christy. I'll be your nurse for tonight. If you need anything, if you feel strange, like you get dizzy or nauseated, you push that button. Nothing is too small, and I'll be in and out all night. What's your pain level right now on a scale of 1 to 10? It's about a 5, but it doesn't matter because I don't want anything for pain, he said weakly. She smiled. Well, you may change your mind, but we'll see. She turned to Keegan. Mr. Tanner, that chair leans back if you'd like to get some sleep. He nodded. Gabe's mom will be arriving in a couple of hours. I guess we can't both be here? Well, not usually, but I'll check and see if we can make an exception since she's coming from such a long way away. How do you know that? She smiled. Everyone knows that Gabe Tanner is from Pine Forest, Georgia, that he saved Taylor Keno, and that he's a hero, and that he was shot. Millions of people are praying for him as we speak, and I'm honored to be able to be the one to take care of him tonight. Gabe smiled. I don't know about the hero part, but can you do me a favor? He asked quietly. Yes, what do you need? Tell Kelly when she comes to work in the morning that I agree with her. That's it? Gabe grinned. Yep, that's it. The nurse left and Keegan smiled at his son. Well done. How are you feeling? I mean, both physically and emotionally. Be honest. Are you doing okay? Gabe frowned. I'm in a little bit of pain, but I can handle it. I'm really tired, and it feels like a huge effort to speak, but I do want to talk to you about something that's bugging me. Taylor and I were talking about what went down today, and, well, it's about me killing those 2 guys. Keegan nodded. I figured you'd need to talk about that sooner or later. I know it's a strange, almost surreal feeling, and it might make you feel down or sad for a while, but eventually it will start to ease. Gabe frowned. That's the problem, Dad. I don't feel bad about it. What kind of person am I that I can kill 2 people and not even feel remorse about it? Am I some sort of psychopath? Am I evil? Is that why I've been so obsessed with guns my whole life? Wow. Keegan took a moment to process what Gabe just said. Son, You are the farthest thing from evil that there is. You're God's warrior. You dispatch evil, and that's what you did today. First, those men tried to kill you, and they had no qualms about taking a young, innocent girl away from her family to what probably would have ended in her death, but not before she suffered immense abasement. Abasement? Humiliation and degradation. Who knows exactly what things Payne and Black had in store for her? Even if she'd made it out alive, she may never have recovered emotionally. You are not a psychopath. You feel things deeply, maybe too deeply. Your current feelings are evidence of that. And your so-called obsession with guns is because I introduced you to them at a young age and you had a natural talent for shooting. Would you say Michael Phelps had an obsession with swimming, or Michael Jordan had an obsession with basketball, or Eric Keno had an obsession with martial arts? Gabe nodded. I get it. I wish you could continue to go on without feeling the weight of shooting those men. You don't feel it now because you're still in rescue mode. You'll eventually come down off that, and it will sink in, and you will feel it. I know, because, well, I know. You love God and His Son, and you will feel His love for all of mankind and feel how it hurts Him to have people choose evil. But isn't killing also evil? Keegan sighed. David killed Goliath. Was he doing evil? David killed Goliath. Was he doing evil, or was he being God's warrior? David was saving the lives of his people. He was a hero. And today, Gabe, you were a hero. Gabe sighed. Okay, I think I understand. Thanks, Dad. So you never did tell me what happened today that got your meeting canceled? Keegan looked up. Well, he really didn't want to lay it on his son right now. Dad? I'd rather not say right now. Why? Did you have to kill someone? No. What happened after I came here to the hospital to be with you. Well, why don't you want to tell me? Because I want you to relax and recover. So, you're saying that whatever happened today would make me not be able to relax? Well, that alone makes me not be able to relax. Did someone get hurt? What happened? Is Jeff okay? I won't be able to rest without knowing. Keegan sighed. He totally botched that. Knowing what happened to Grandmaster Keno would destroy Gabe. But now Gabe would suffer with the not knowing. Maybe he could tell him, but play it down. Dad? Okay, I'll tell you what happened. Before the meeting even got started today, someone came to the gate at the Keno's house. New scene. Eric Keno Jr., known to the world as Ricky Keno, stared down at his father in disbelief. How could this happen? How could they start out the day as honored guests at an Ameritech meeting and end up in a hospital with his father barely clinging to life? In one day, the Keno family had grown by 7 and lost 3, probably 4, he thought in dismay. As much as he wanted to think positive, as Shelley had asked, his father's last words played through his mind. He'd acted as if he knew this was coming. He'd begun trying to say goodbye almost immediately. Ricky's eyes filled as he remembered those few horrific minutes. It was a nightmare that he would never forget, whether his father lives or dies. His father asked him if he believed all they professed to believe or not. And now his strong rock of a father was lying here, a machine breathing for him, which Ricky was pretty sure he would hate. His father stated very clearly that it was time for Ricky to stand up and take over. He'd actually been saying things like that all year, again, as if he knew what was coming. He remembered the strange joint vision his sister and father shared 3 years earlier in Jeffy's engagement party. His father had been speaking to the group, and his body had suddenly jerked, his chest caving in, and he fell back. And it had looked so much like he'd been shot in the chest that Jason's agents actually started looking for the shooter. That wasn't just a figment of his imagination. That vision really happened. And now it has come to pass. Why would they be given a vision of his father being shot in the chest? Was it because he was going to pass out of this world, or because he would survive? He needed to speak with Jeffy and see if there was any part of the vision that she hadn't shared with the family. He took his father's hand in his, this strong hand that could do so many things. Squeezing it, Ricky spoke softly. Dad, I know you want me to stand up and help the family, and I will. I accept the challenge, but that doesn't mean I'm giving you permission to leave us. Please, please, don't leave. Not now. Your children, the new little ones, they need to know you. So I'm asking you to buck up and power through. I know you might be tired. You've worked so hard your entire life. You're always the last to bed and the first to rise. I get it. But I'm asking you to wait for your rest in our Father's arms a little longer. We need you. Earlier today, you said Shelley would be okay. And she's trying hard to be brave for you. But I see the fear and the hurt in her eyes, and I feel like it's not fair for you to leave without her. I'm asking you to fight. And if this is your plan, dear God, I'm asking you to consider changing it. Yes, Father, we will all pick up our crosses and carry them if it is your will. But, Father, this is a hard burden to bear. And yeah, I guess I'm asking if you're willing, please take this cup from us. Ricky stopped his prayer because he was overcome with emotion. And finally he said, Forgive me for my weakness, Father. I will trust in you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. New scene. Keegan finished the telling of the story, watching his son's eyes carefully, and he was brought here to this hospital, and he's just right down the hall from here. He was in surgery for hours to remove the bullet and to repair his heart. He's not conscious, and we're waiting for him to wake up, but we don't know when that will be. Gabe blinked, and tears ran down his face. He was sick and shaken, and had never in his life felt as bad as he did at this moment, not even when he'd been kidnapped and thought he was going to die. And at this moment, he thought he'd gladly trade places with Grandmaster Kino. He'd gladly trade his own life for his. Gabe, Keegan said softly, I knew there was something wrong back at the house. I had a dream, remember? I thought Grandmaster Kino had a heart attack. I guess you could call it exactly that, an attack on his heart. I can't stand this. I can't do it. What do you mean? Gabe only shook his head as the tears continued to fall. Do you want to talk about it, son? He shook his head. Sometimes it helps to talk about what you're feeling. Gabe's chin quivered. Not now. Son, I'd like to be alone, please. Are you sure? He didn't answer. He actually turned away onto his right side, grunting with the pain it caused him to do so. He welcomed the pain. Okay, well, I'll step out for a little while, Keegan said. He turned to leave the room, but stopped at the doorway at the sound of his son weeping. He thought that sound would be something he'd never forget. He left the room and went to speak with the others. New scene. Ricky glanced around the room. The boys, young Eric, Jojo, and Logan, sat in a circle talking softly with Taylor, obviously trying to comfort her, but having to wipe away their own tears as they did. Jeff had his arm around Mickey. His father had counseled her extensively. Lori was whispering to Justin. Being a trauma nurse, she was probably trying to ease his fears. Angel sat with Shelley, while her husband Jason stood stoically against a wall, much like Ricky himself was doing. Kimmy had not been feeling well, and Jensen had taken her home. And Bree sat on the other side of her mother, her arm draped around her shoulder. The door opened and Keegan stepped in, and he looked around at all the grief, and he sighed. He nodded at Ricky and also took a place against a wall, trying to figure out how he could help these people. Ricky was trying to do the same thing. Looking around, he realized that everyone had now been in to see his father. Everyone came back from doing so with the same pale face and strained expression and tear tracks. He shook his head. This couldn't go on. It was time for him to do what his father asked. He pushed away from the wall. Jeffy? She looked up. When you and Dad had that joint vision back a few years ago at your engagement party, tell me exactly what you saw. Her lips trembled. I saw Dad get hit in the chest with a bullet and blood spread out in a circle, and I knew it was precognitive. You never told us exactly. You never told us exactly what you saw or that you thought it was a prediction of things to come. That was by Dad's request. In his vision, he'd seen it coming, and he felt the pain and even lost consciousness. He, too, felt it was something that he would one day face. He didn't want people to worry, so he asked me to not say what we saw. He'd come to accept it, willing to be with God if that was the plan. In the vision, did you see him actually die? No, it was an assumption. And that's what everyone here is doing now. Assuming. Dad says to never assume. Keegan cleared his throat. Gabe just reminded me that he had a dream that Eric had a heart attack. Remember? It was so real that Gabe ran to the inn to see him and make sure he was okay. It was actually on his birthday. Ricky nodded. So, why would they be given a warning if there was nothing we could do to avoid it? Is it so that we would accept it? I don't think that's it. Ricky closed his eyes. Father, help me to understand, please, he whispered, barely audible. He opened his eyes. These words just came into my head. When we're given trials, it's to hone us and sharpen us. Zechariah 13:9. This third I will put into the fire. I will refine them like silver and test them like gold, and they will call on my name, and I will answer them, and I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is our God. He nodded his head. We will call on his name, and he will answer us, but it may not be the answer we want. How many times has my father said those words to me? So, if God is refining us, testing us, we need to do what Dad asked and rise up and pass the test, with or without him, as much as it pains me to say that. One of the last things Dad said to me before he closed his eyes was actually a question. Do you believe or not? I do. I do believe. God is real. He's shown me too many miracles. Like Keegan said earlier today, we all talk the talk. It's time to walk the walk. Look, it's been a long day, and it's almost 9 o'clock. We all have things to attend to. We need to organize into shifts, and someone needs to stay tonight. Well, as much as I want to be at Eric's side, Shelley began, I need to be there in the morning for the children. I think I need to be there when they wake up their first morning in their new home. I agree, Ricky said. I'll stay with Dad tonight. Jason, you have a company in upheaval that you need to run. Justin, you and Mark need to make sure the paperwork and custody hearing for our new brothers and sister goes through smoothly. Joey, Jeff, and Cam, I'm sure Jason has things you could handle for him to get on with the revamping project that still has to go forward. And like I said, we'll take shifts with Dad. So who wants to relieve me in the morning? I will, Justin said. Mark, can you handle what needs to get done? I'll be available by phone. Absolutely. I would like to hear the recording of what Eric said to you, if that's okay, Shelley said. I'll get that to you first thing tomorrow, Jason replied. Thank you. And Ricky, I'll be here tomorrow by the afternoon, Shelley said. Justin, that will give you some time to work before the day is over. Justin and Ricky both nodded. And I can take the next night shift, Jojo said. Okay, and that's enough for now, Ricky said. Before you all leave, can we have another prayer? Keegan spoke up. Lizzie will be here any minute. The driver's turning in now. Will you wait just a minute so that she can join? Of course. Good, Taylor said, because I need a minute. There are some people who want to zoom in with us the next time we all pray together. Keegan nodded. Actually, me too. John asked me to do the same, and he has my daughters with him. Young Eric nodded. Me too. Give me a second or two. Some studio people have asked me to zoom them in. She's coming in the door. I'll go get her and bring her back, Keegan said. Keegan walked to the emergency room doors and watched his sweet wife walk toward him. She looked tired and worried and pregnant. She was only about 4.5 months along, but was already starting to show because she had 5 previous pregnancies, and as she told Keegan, you start to show earlier with each one. She smiled as she came through the doors and walked straight up to him, put her arms around his neck and leaned her head against his chest. He held her tight and realized she was crying as her shoulders shook. Oh, honey, I know. It's okay. Gabe is going to be okay. And Grandmaster Keno? Well, that I'm not sure about. Right now, the family's waiting on us to pray with them in the waiting room before they disperse for the night. She nodded. He tilted her face up and smiled at her, wiped her tears away. I love you, Elizabeth. She sniffed. I love you too. They walked to the room. Everyone greeted Lizzie, and then they formed a circle like before and linked hands like before, but this time Ricky suggested they also kneel, so they all quickly dropped to their knees. I'll start, Ricky said, and we'll go around the circle to my right. If you don't feel like praying out loud or are shy, there's no shame in that. Just tell the next person to go. Ricky prayed a powerful prayer, and next to him Jason did the same, and it went around the large circle. No one opted out. What they didn't realize was that Isla was on Taylor's Zoom call, and their prayer circle included about 2,000 other people. New scene. Gabe had been happy to see his mother. They cried together, and she stroked his head and sang to him until he fell asleep. Lizzie insisted on sitting on the smaller chair next to the bed and letting Keegan take the reclining chair for the night. When he woke in the early dawn hours as nurses went in and out of the room, he saw Lizzie had fallen asleep, the bed rail down, her head on the mattress next to her son. Keegan rose and went to her and kissed her cheek. I'll be right back. He found a bathroom to freshen up and stopped by Eric's room. Ricky was standing by his father's bed, his hand on his chest. Hey, Rick. Ricky turned and gave a slight smile. Any change? Keegan asked. No. Keegan sighed. Well, give him time to heal. God's timing is perfect. Who told you that? You did. Keegan had the inkling that Ricky needed a man's strength to help him, and he went to him and took his hand and pulled him in for a hug, and Ricky laid his head on Keegan's shoulder, and Keegan patted him on the back. You're my brother in this, Rick, and we'll handle this together, whatever happens. Ricky sniffed, and Keegan hugged him tight, like he would his own son. And finally they pulled apart, and Ricky nodded. Thanks for that. I'm just 2 doors down if you need me. He went back to Gabe's room to try to get his wife to rest. And that is the end of chapter 35.